I thought she'd ignore it, the way I kept stealing glances at her. But when my intern smiled and whispered, "Caught staring? Want to explain, or want me to?" That was the moment everything between us quietly changed. I noticed her before she ever noticed me. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way, just in those small, unguarded seconds when she entered a room and changed its pace without trying to. She wasn't loud, didn't demand attention, didn't carry herself like someone who needed to prove anything. She simply had presence, a quiet, confident presence that made me want to look twice without realizing I was doing it. Maybe it was the way she skimmed her fingers along the edges of papers when she read, thoughtful and focused. Maybe it was the soft, natural curve of her smile when she concentrated, like she was holding a private joke only she understood. Or maybe it was the way she brushed her hair behind her ear, slow, absent-minded, graceful in a way that didn't feel practiced. I'm 24. She's older, established, composed. I wasn't supposed to notice those details. And yet, every time we worked together, I caught myself watching the small things: her calm posture, her steady breathing, the slight tightening at the corner of her eyes when she found an error in a file. I wasn't staring out of boldness. It was more like gravity, subtle but deliberate. My eyes kept finding her without asking permission. Then came the moment. She was sitting at her desk, reviewing a folder I had just brought in. Afternoon light poured through the blinds, striping her desk with warm gold. The soft glow caught on the strands of her hair, making her look softer than her usual composed self. I paused longer than I should have, because something in the sight of her, focused, peaceful, felt grounding. She looked up. Slowly. Carefully. Her eyes found mine before I had time to pretend I was looking anywhere else. There was no shock, no annoyance. Just awareness. A quiet, patient awareness that said she noticed this before, these lingering glances I thought I'd hidden. Her lips curved, small at first, then fuller. A smile that felt like she was letting me know she saw more than I intended to reveal. "Caught staring?" she murmured, voice warm, teasing but not sharp. Then she tilted her head just slightly, like she was studying a question rather than accusing me of anything. "Want to explain, or want me to?" My heart knocked hard against my ribs. I opened my mouth, but she lifted her eyebrows in gentle amusement as if to say, "It's okay. You don't have to answer." Her tone wasn't flirtatious, not outright. It was something softer. Something that felt like she was giving me an exit if I needed one, or an opening if I dared take it. I apologized out of instinct, but she just let out a quiet breath of laughter, brushing it off with a grace that eased the tension rather than deepened it. The moment ended in seconds, but something shifted. Not awkwardness. Not distance. Just the fragile awareness that she had seen me, really seen me, and instead of pulling away, she smiled. And that changed everything. After that moment, her smile, her teasing question, things could have easily slipped into awkwardness. They didn't. If anything, something softened between us. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but in the subtle, almost invisible adjustments people make when they start paying attention to each other. She wasn't distant the next morning. In fact, she greeted me with a warm, unhurried "Good morning," her voice slightly softer than usual, like she was letting me know yesterday hadn't bothered her at all. Maybe even that she found it endearing. When she needed help learning the new office software, she asked me directly. Not formally, not with that professional stiffness some seniors adopt with younger colleagues, just a gentle, "Do you have a moment? I trust you more with this than the manual." There was a quiet sincerity behind it, a kind of respect that disarmed me. We ended up sitting close at her workstation, shoulders angled toward each other, sharing a single monitor. Every few minutes our arms brushed, light, accidental, warm. Each time, I felt a small jolt of awareness, the kind that travels through your body before you can gather yourself. But she never moved away. Not once. If anything, she seemed comfortable with the closeness, leaning slightly forward to pay attention, her perfume drifting in small, unobtrusive waves, soft jasmine layered with something warmer, like sandalwood. As I guided her through shortcuts and tools, she watched me with a kind of quiet focus that made my chest tighten. When I made a small joke about the outdated system, she laughed, not politely, but genuinely, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Her hand briefly touched my forearm as she steadied a stack of files, but the touch lingered just a half-second too long to be purely incidental. And every time she thanked me, she said it like she meant more than just the words. "You really are patient with me," she said once, voice low, almost thoughtful. "Most people rush. You take your time." I didn't know how to tell her that I took my time because being near her made everything feel slower in the best way. During coffee breaks, she started asking questions, not intrusive ones, just gentle curiosities. My interests. My goals. My background. She listened fully, giving me the kind of attention most people reserve for someone they trust. And I asked about her work experience, the departments she'd handled, the cities she'd lived in. Every answer revealed another layer of her, competent, insightful, quietly strong. There were silences, too, the comfortable kind. Moments where we didn't need to talk. Where we simply existed in the same space, aware of each other in a way that felt peaceful rather than charged. By the end of the week, people probably thought nothing had changed. But I felt it. And I think she did too. The distance between us hadn't closed all the way, but it was no longer the same. It had softened, warmed, and taken a shape that felt like possibility. The office after hours has a different heartbeat. The fluorescent hum softens, the clicking keyboards fade, and the whole place feels like it exhales, finally letting its guard down. That's probably why that night felt different from the start. It wasn't just quiet, it was intimate in a quiet, unspoken way. She was still in her office when everyone else had left. Papers spread around her in soft disarray, glasses slid low on her nose, a pen tucked behind her ear. She looked human. Not the composed, efficient woman who commanded attention just by walking into a room, but someone tired, someone carrying a day heavier than usual. I stepped in gently, placing the last signed file on her desk. She looked up slowly, and for a moment the exhaustion in her eyes didn't hide itself. She didn't force a smile, didn't adjust her posture, didn't mask anything. "Long day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it all evening. "Long year," she corrected softly, leaning back in her chair. Her head tilted up toward the ceiling for a second before she met my eyes again. "Sometimes it feels like I'm the only one who has to keep everything together." There was something different about her tone. Not self-pity. Not frustration. Just truth, quiet and raw. I pulled out the chair beside her and sat without thinking twice. She didn't seem surprised. If anything, her shoulders relaxed a little, like she appreciated not having to pretend she was fine. "You don't always have to," I said. A faint smile tugged at her lips, sad, grateful, conflicted. "That's the thing," she murmured. "When people rely on you, you don't get many places where you can put the weight down." She folded her hands on her lap, then unfolded them again. A subtle sign of someone who rarely shows uncertainty. I didn't push her to explain more, but she did anyway. "I've spent years being the steady one," she continued. "The reliable one. The one who can't slip, can't falter." Her voice dipped lower. "You'd be surprised how lonely competence can feel." Her words sat between us, heavier than the silence that followed. I didn't touch her, not yet. I simply leaned forward a little, letting her know she had my full attention. And something about that, my quiet presence, maybe, unlocked a part of her she usually kept hidden. She laughed softly, almost embarrassed. "Sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this." "Because you're tired," I said gently. "And because you finally trust someone enough to say it." She blinked once, slowly. Then she did something small but deeply intimate. She reached for the file on her desk, but her fingers grazed my wrist instead. It should have been accidental. It wasn't. Her hand stayed there, warm and light, like she was grounding herself through the contact. I didn't move away. The moment didn't turn romantic. It didn't need to. It was simply honest, a glimpse of her vulnerability offered freely, and my quiet promise to hold it with care. When I left that night, her confession stayed with me. And the way her hand lingered on my wrist stayed even longer. The shift didn't happen with a big moment. It was subtle, like the air warmed a few degrees without anyone adjusting the thermostat. But by the time that day arrived, the feeling between us had changed enough that even the quietest interactions carried a new weight. She asked me to help her fine-tune her upcoming presentation. Not unusual. But the way she asked felt softer. "Do you have a minute? I'd really like your eyes on this." Her voice held a warmth that hadn't been there before the late-night confession. Not flirtation, but a kind of trust you don't give lightly. She led me to a small meeting room she liked, a tucked-away space with tall windows, dimmer lighting, and a table that always looked too polished for how little it was used. It felt oddly personal, like stepping into a corner of the building she claimed as her own. She stood near the screen, laptop open, hair loosely gathered but with a few strands escaping around her face. As she scrolled through the slides, she seemed more relaxed than usual, focused, yes, but with a gentleness around her eyes that made her look younger, lighter. "Come closer," she said quietly. "I want you to see the details." So I stepped behind her, close enough to see the faint shimmer of her hair, close enough that her perfume, soft jasmine, and something warm beneath, rose from her gently instead of drifting. I leaned forward to point at a graph on her slide. And she didn't move away. Not an inch. The room felt smaller instantly. My breath caught, not from nerves, but from awareness. Awareness of her. Awareness of us. Awareness that this was no longer something I could pretend was one-sided. Her back was just inches from my chest, her shoulder near my collarbone. When I reached past her to tap a key, my sleeve brushed her waist. She inhaled softly, not sharply, not startled, just enough for me to notice. Then she stilled. Completely. "So," she murmured, voice low, eyes still on the screen. "You always do that, you know." I blinked. "Do what?" She turned her head just enough that I could see the small, knowing smile forming. "Get closer when you're explaining things. You don't realize it, but I do." I stepped back instinctively, heat rushing to my face. Before I could apologize, she pivoted toward me, her hand lifting just slightly. She touched my forearm, light but deliberate. Her fingers were warm, steady, almost reassuring. "It's okay," she whispered. "I didn't say I minded." The words weren't playful. They weren't teasing like the first time. They carried something deeper, something honest, something she hadn't allowed herself to say out loud until now. We both stood there, either of us stepping away, the quiet between us filled with an undeniable truth. The closeness wasn't accidental anymore. And neither one of us wanted to pretend it was. After that moment in the meeting room, a moment that hung in the air long after we walked away, everything felt sharper. Not louder. Not busier. Just sharper, like every glance carried an unspoken question, and every small touch held more meaning than it should. It wasn't awkward. If anything, there was a newfound gentleness in the way she interacted with me. But underneath that warmth, something else lived too, hesitation. A carefulness that hadn't been there before. She still smiled when she passed my desk, but her eyes lingered a half-second longer, as if checking whether I was still okay being close to her. Her hand still brushed mine when she handed me files, but now there was a breath of uncertainty afterward, like she was wondering if she'd crossed a line without meaning to. And I felt my own shift. Every time she looked at me, truly looked, I felt a quiet tug in my chest. A pull toward her that carried weight. I found myself thinking about her on the way to work, wondering how her morning was going, hoping her day was kind to her. I felt protective, drawn in, and quietly afraid of how easily I could fall deeper. But the fear wasn't about her. It was about everything else. The age difference. The workplace. People's assumptions. Her position. My future. Her reputation. Those thoughts came like soft warnings, gentle but persistent. And I wasn't the only one carrying them. One afternoon, we ran into each other in the copy room. She was gathering printed documents, leaning slightly against the counter in a way that made her look both elegant and deeply, quietly tired. I stepped beside her to grab my papers, and the back of her hand brushed mine. A small touch. Soft. Barely a moment. But she froze, not visibly, not in a dramatic way. Just a tiny pause, like her breath caught on something she wasn't ready to confront. Her voice came out softer than usual. "This isn't simple, you know." She didn't look at me when she said it. She stared at the papers in her hands, eyes tracing the text without seeing it. "I know," I said quietly. "I never thought it was." She exhaled, slow, measured, careful. "People talk. People misunderstand. They assume things. And I've lived long enough to know how fast a small rumor can grow teeth." Her fingers tightened around the edge of a page. Not fear, just caution. A practiced, familiar kind of caution reserved for people who've been burned by assumptions before. I took a small step closer, not touching her, just letting my presence speak. "But simple doesn't always mean right," I said. She looked up then, meeting my eyes with a quiet, aching honesty. Something flickered there, wanting, restrained, conflicted. "I'm not pulling away," she murmured. "I'm just thinking." And somehow, that meant more to me than any confession. Because she wasn't denying what existed between us. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't dismissing the closeness. She was simply trying to find the safest path through something neither of us had expected. The longing stayed. The hesitation stayed. But for the first time, the tension between us felt like a shared truth, not a secret I carried alone. The storm arrived without warning, thick clouds rolling over the city, the sky dimming in a way that made the office feel smaller, quieter. Rain hammered against the windows, heavy and insistent, drowning out distant traffic and leaving only the soft hum of indoor lights. People rushed out early, umbrellas opening like frantic wings. But she stayed behind, standing near the glass doors with her phone in hand and a faint crease between her brows. I noticed before she said anything. "Everything okay?" She looked up, offering a small, apologetic smile. "My ride's stuck across town. Roads are a mess." She gestured toward the downpour. "I'll wait it out here. I'll wait with you," I said before I had time to overthink it. She didn't argue. She just nodded, almost relieved. We settled onto one of the lobby benches, side by side, the storm creating a soft cocoon around us. The overhead lights were dim, the space mostly empty. Her coat draped across her lap, her fingers lightly gripping the fabric. Something in her posture seemed unusually fragile, subtle, but present. For a few minutes, we just watched the rain. Sheets of water streaking down the glass, headlights blurring into soft halos. It felt intimate. Like the world outside had been muted just long enough for us to hear things we'd been ignoring. She was the one who broke the silence. "You look at me differently," she said quietly, fingers tracing a crease in her coat. "You look at me like you're trying to understand something no one else bothers to see." Her voice wasn't accusatory. It was gentle, almost unsure. That alone told me how much this meant. "I look at you because I admire you," I said softly. "Because there's more to you than you let people notice." She inhaled, slow and steady, eyes fixed on the rain. "I'm not sure I remember how to receive that. Admiration. Kindness. Anything that feels." She hesitated, searching for the word. "Tender." My chest tightened. Not with pity, never that, but with a deeper, quieter empathy. "What happened?" I asked carefully. "Only if you want to tell me." Her shoulders fell, tension slipping through the small exhales she released. "I spent years with someone who loved the idea of me but not the reality. The strong parts, yes. The competent parts. The composed version of me that made life easier for him." She swallowed softly. "But the tired parts? The overwhelmed parts? The vulnerable parts? Those were inconvenient." She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. But the steadiness in her voice wavered just enough to reveal the loneliness underneath. "And now?" I asked. No, she whispered. I'm afraid of misreading things. Of wanting something that complicates your life. Of becoming the reason people judge you. I turned slightly, letting my hand rest over hers, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Her fingers curled beneath mine, warm and hesitant. For the record, I said softly, you've never complicated anything for me. You've only made things clearer. She looked at our hands, her breath shaking just slightly. And for the first time, she didn't let go. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle by the time she stood, gathering her coat and bag. Streetlights outside blurred in the wet glass, casting long reflections that made the lobby feel suspended in time. She moved with her usual grace, but her steps were slower, almost hesitant, as if she were measuring the weight of the moment. I didn't rush her. I stayed where I was, letting her make the first move. The quiet tension between us was no longer awkward. It had become something charged, something heavy with unspoken desire. Something we both felt but hadn't yet named aloud. She paused at the door, glancing back at me. Her eyes held warmth, vulnerability, and a flicker of courage that made my chest tighten. I've been trying not to cross a line, she said softly. But every time I step back, it feels wrong. I took a careful step closer, giving her space to choose, giving her the freedom to decide if this moment was hers to accept. She shifted, almost imperceptibly, before lifting her hand toward my face. Her fingertips traced lightly along my jaw, slow and deliberate, gentle but deliberate enough to convey what words could not. I leaned into her touch, closing my eyes for a brief second, letting the warmth and softness of her hand communicate what neither of us had dared to say. Her gaze stayed on me, steady, unflinching yet tender. We don't have to rush, I whispered. We just have to be honest. Her lips curved into a small, shy smile. Not teasing this time, not playful, but real. Open. Vulnerable. The kind of smile that comes after someone has made a choice, after they've allowed themselves to trust a feeling long held in check. Slowly, carefully, she stepped into me. Her forehead rested lightly against my chest, and I felt her exhale against me, a quiet, trembling release of tension she had carried for months. My arms wrapped around her, not possessively, but as a safe harbor, steady and warm. She leaned further into the embrace, letting herself be held, letting herself feel the security in the closeness we'd cultivated so delicately. Her hands found their place along my sides, resting lightly, as if checking that I was real and solid. I pressed my cheek to her hair, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of her, jasmine with a hint of something soft and intimate, something that was hers alone. We stayed like that for a long moment, quiet, still, savoring the closeness without needing to speak. There were no dramatic declarations, no rush to change anything external. Just two people choosing to be together, slowly, deliberately, honestly. Finally, she pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were clear, warm, and filled with a quiet certainty. I'm glad I let myself step forward, she whispered. I smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Me too. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming with reflection and quiet. We walked out together, side by side, our steps in sync, not because the world demanded it, but because we had chosen it. It wasn't forbidden. It wasn't reckless. It was simply two hearts that had taken their time, faced hesitation, and finally decided that the pull between them was worth embracing. And in that choice, there was something gentle, true, and beautifully complete. The story ended not with a climax, but with quiet contentment, a warmth that lingered long after the moment, like a shared secret between two people who had learned that love, when nurtured slowly, can be tender, profound, and entirely worth it.